What happens when one of music's most legendary voices sits down for what should be a celebration of her incredible career, only to face disrespect, dismissive comments, and questions so inappropriate they cross every line imaginable? In just 33 seconds, a simple question would ignite a firestorm that exposed the ugly truth behind the glitz and glamour of late-night television, revealing a host so consumed by his own ego that he forgot he was sitting across from royalty. This is the story of how Chaka Khan, the Queen of Funk herself, walked off Andy Cohen's show after being pushed too far. And trust me, you're going to want to hear every single word of what went down. The stage was set like any other evening. The lights were bright, the audience was buzzing with excitement, and Chaka Khan walked onto the set looking absolutely radiant. She wore an elegant outfit that sparkled under the studio lights, her signature curls framing her face perfectly. The crowd erupted in applause. This was a woman who had given the world hits that defined generations. From I'm Every Woman to Ain't Nobody, her voice had been the soundtrack to countless lives. Andy Cohen greeted her with his typical showman energy, that big smile plastered across his face. They exchanged pleasantries, the kind of surface-level niceties that always kick off these interviews. But anyone paying close attention could sense something in the air. There was a tension, subtle at first, but definitely there. So Chaka, thank you so much for being here, Andy said, settling into his chair with that casual confidence he always carried. I have to say, you look amazing. Thank you, darling, Chaka responded, her voice warm but measured. She had done 1,000 interviews before. She knew the game. Now, I want to dive right in because there's so much to talk about. Andy continued, your career spans decades. You've worked with everyone. You've seen it all. But let's start with something fun. I heard through the grapevine that you once turned down a collaboration with someone pretty major. Care to spill who it was? Chaka smiled politely. Well, over the years, there have been many offers, many opportunities. I've always tried to choose projects that felt right for me, that aligned with my artistic vision. Sure, Andy said, waving his hand dismissively. But, come on, give us a name. The audience wants to know. Was it Prince? Michael? Madonna? There it was. That first push. That first moment where the interview stopped being about celebration and started being about spectacle. Chaka's smile tightened just a fraction. I'd rather focus on the collaborations I did do, she said gracefully, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. Working with Rufus was incredible. The energy we had as a band was something special. Right, Rufus, Andy said, and there was something in his tone. Something that suggested he was already bored, already looking for the next angle. But that was, 40 years ago? 50 years ago? I mean, what have you done lately that's really made an impact? The audience went quiet. You could feel the shift in the room. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This was disrespect, plain and simple. Chaka sat up a little straighter. I've been touring, recording, connecting with my fans. Music isn't just about chasing trends or trying to stay relevant by someone else's standards. It's about artistry, about meaning. Sure, Andy said again, that same dismissive tone creeping back in. But you have to admit, the music industry has changed. It's all about streaming numbers now, social media presence. I mean, do you even have TikTok? No, I don't have TikTok, Chaka said, her voice firm. And I don't need TikTok to validate decades of work that speaks for itself. Andy laughed, but it wasn't a warm laugh. It was condescending. Come on, Chaka, don't be so serious. I'm just saying, if you want to reach younger audiences, you've got to meet them where they are. You can't just rest on your laurels forever. Rest on her laurels. He actually said that. To Chaka Khan, the woman who had broken barriers, who had poured her heart and soul into every performance, every recording. The woman who had influenced countless artists who came after her. I'm not resting on anything, Chaka said, and now there was an edge to her voice. I'm still creating, still performing, still giving everything I have to my craft. Just because I'm not doing whatever trend is popular this week doesn't mean I'm not working. Okay, Andy said, holding up his hands like he was trying to calm her down, which only made things worse. Let's move on. Let's talk about your personal life for a second. Here's where things really started to go off the rails. You've been married, twice? 3 times? Andy asked, leaning forward like he was about to dig into some juicy gossip. I've been married twice, Chaka said carefully. And both ended in divorce, right? Andy pressed. That must have been tough. Do you think your career got in the way of those relationships? I mean, it's hard to maintain a marriage when you're always on the road, always in the studio. Chaka stared at him for a long moment. My personal relationships are my personal relationships. They're not fodder for entertainment. But you're a public figure, Andy countered, as if that justified anything. People are curious. They want to know the real you, not just the superstar on stage. The real me is someone who deserves respect and privacy, just like anyone else, Chaka said. Just because I've shared my music with the world doesn't mean I owe anyone access to every intimate detail of my life. Fair enough, Andy said, but you could tell he wasn't really listening. He was already moving on to his next talking point, his next attempt to create a moment. Let's talk about feuds. Every great artist has had feuds. Diana Ross and Aretha Franklin had their thing. Madonna and everyone has drama. Have you ever had beef with anyone in the industry? I don't do beef, Chaka said flatly. I focus on my work. Oh, come on, Andy laughed. Everyone has someone they can't stand. What about Whitney Houston? There were rumors that you two didn't get along because she covered your song and it became a bigger hit. The audience gasped. Even they could sense how inappropriate this was. Chaka's expression changed. The warmth that had been there at the beginning of the interview was completely gone now. Whitney Houston was a beautiful, talented soul who left us too soon. I have nothing but love and respect for her memory. And the fact that you would even suggest otherwise is disgusting. Whoa, I'm just asking, Andy said. Still trying to play it off like this was all in good fun. It's just a question. It's a disrespectful question, Chaka shot back. You're trying to create drama where there is none. You're trying to pit women against each other for your own entertainment. I'm just doing my job, Andy said, and now his own frustration was starting to show. This is a talk show. I ask questions. If you didn't want to answer questions, why did you come on? I came on to talk about my music, my legacy, my art, Chaka said, her voice rising. Not to be interrogated about my personal life or have you disrespect other artists who can't even defend themselves. Look, I don't know what you want from me, Andy said, throwing his hands up. I'm trying to have a conversation here, but you're being so defensive about everything. I'm being defensive? Chaka said, incredulous. You've spent this entire interview trying to diminish my work, pry into my private life, and create fake controversies. And I'm the one being defensive? The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The audience sat in stunned silence. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was uncomfortable. This was a train wreck happening in real time. Andy tried to regain control. Okay, let's just take a breath here. Let's reset. I want to ask you about your upcoming projects. What's next for Chaka Khan? But Chaka wasn't having it. What's next is that I'm going to continue doing what I've always done, with or without the approval of people who don't understand or appreciate real artistry. Real artistry? Andy repeated, and there was that condescension again. Are you saying other artists aren't real artists? Don't twist my words, Chaka warned. You know exactly what I meant. I honestly don't, Andy said, shrugging. It sounds like you're being pretty judgmental about other people's music. This is unbelievable, Chaka said, shaking her head. You've done nothing but judge me this entire time, and now you're trying to flip it around and make me the bad guy? I'm not trying to make you the bad guy, Andy protested. I'm just saying, you came on here with this attitude. What attitude? Chaka demanded. The attitude of someone who expects basic respect? The attitude of someone who doesn't want to play your little games? There are no games, Andy said, his voice getting harder now. This is just how these interviews work. If you can't handle a few tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing press. That was it. That was the line. Telling Chaka Khan, a woman who had been doing interviews and handling the press with grace and dignity for over 50 years, that maybe she shouldn't be doing press. The sheer audacity, the unbelievable arrogance. Chaka stood up. Just like that. She reached down, unclipped her microphone, and placed it on the chair. What are you doing? Andy asked, surprise finally breaking through his smugness. I'm done, Chaka said simply. I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected by someone who clearly has no appreciation for what I've accomplished, or who I am as a person. Chaka, come on, Andy said, and now there was a hint of panic in his voice. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Guests didn't just walk off, not on his show. Don't be like this. Sit back down. We can talk about whatever you want. I don't want to talk about anything with you, Chaka said, her voice calm but absolute. You've shown me exactly who you are, and I have no interest in continuing this charade. "You're really going to walk off?" Andy said, and now he was getting angry. His ego couldn't handle this. "You do realize how this makes you look, right?" "I know exactly how this makes me look," Chaka said, turning to face him one last time. "It makes me look like someone who has enough self-respect to walk away from a situation where I'm not being treated with dignity. And if you think that reflects poorly on me, that says everything about you and nothing about me." "This is so unprofessional," Andy called after her as she started walking toward the exit. "You can't just leave in the middle of an interview." Chaka stopped. She turned back around, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the entire studio. "Unprofessional? Let me tell you what's unprofessional. Unprofessional is inviting someone onto your show under the pretense of celebrating their career and then spending the entire time trying to tear them down. Unprofessional is asking invasive questions about someone's personal life that have nothing to do with their work. Unprofessional is trying to manufacture drama and conflict instead of having a genuine conversation. Unprofessional is disrespecting a guest, disrespecting deceased artists, and then acting like the victim when you get called out on it." The audience began to clap. It started with just a few people, but it grew. They were clapping for her. They were supporting her. Andy's face flushed red. "Are you finished?" "Oh, I'm finished," Chaka said. "I'm finished with this interview, I'm finished with your disrespect, and I'm finished pretending like any of this is okay. You want to know what's next for Chaka Khan? I'll tell you. I'm going to walk out of here with my head held high, knowing that I stood up for myself. I'm going to continue making music, touching people's lives, and being true to who I am. And you're going to sit in that chair and think about how you treated a legend." "A legend?" Andy scoffed, and it was clear now that his ego was completely bruised. "Legends don't walk off shows. Legends don't tolerate being treated like garbage," Chaka countered. "And that's exactly what you've done here tonight. You thought you could push me, test me, get some viral moment for your show. But what you got instead was a reminder that some people can't be pushed around. Some people know their worth. If you walk out that door, you're never coming back on this show," Andy said, as if that was some kind of threat. Chaka actually smiled at that. "Honey, that's not the punishment you think it is." And with that, she turned and walked off the stage. The audience erupted. Some were cheering, some were gasping. Everyone was talking. The camera stayed on Andy, who sat there looking absolutely stunned. He tried to recover, tried to make some joke about what had just happened, but it fell flat. Everyone in that room knew what they had just witnessed. They had watched a host so caught up in his own importance, so desperate for drama and ratings, that he forgot he was interviewing a living legend. He had poked and prodded and pushed, thinking he could get away with it, thinking that his platform gave him the right to treat people however he wanted. But Chaka Khan had shown him otherwise. She had drawn a line in the sand and said, "Enough is enough." She had refused to participate in her own degradation, and in doing so, she had reminded everyone watching what dignity looks like, what self-respect looks like, what standing up for yourself looks like, even when it would be easier to just sit there and take it. Andy tried to continue the show, bringing out his next guest, but the energy was completely off. Everyone was still thinking about what had just happened. Everyone was processing the confrontation they had just witnessed. Behind the scenes, you can only imagine what was happening. Producers scrambling, publicists making calls, social media exploding with reactions. But none of that mattered in the moment. What mattered was that a woman who had given her entire life to her art, who had broken down barriers and paved the way for countless others, had refused to be diminished. Throughout the remainder of the show, Andy made a few comments, trying to downplay what had happened. He said things like, "Well, that was awkward," and "Some people just can't take a joke." But those comments only made things worse. They revealed that he still didn't get it. He still didn't understand why Chaka had walked off. He still thought he was the victim in this situation. But the audience knew better. They had seen the whole thing unfold. They had watched him disrespect her repeatedly. They had heard the inappropriate questions, the dismissive comments, the attempts to create controversy where none existed, and they had seen Chaka handle it with more grace than most people would have been able to muster, right up until the moment she decided she had had enough. This wasn't about Chaka being difficult or unable to handle tough questions. This was about a host who had crossed line after line after line, and then acted shocked when there were consequences. The thing about people like Chaka Khan is that they've earned their place in history. They've put in the work, paid their dues, overcome obstacles that most of us can't even imagine. And after all of that, after everything they've accomplished, They reach a point where they simply don't have to tolerate disrespect anymore. They don't have to smile and nod while someone tries to make them look bad for entertainment value. They don't have to play along with games that serve no purpose other than to boost someone else's ego. That's what Andy didn't understand. He thought that because it was his show, because he had the power in that dynamic, he could do whatever he wanted. He could ask whatever he wanted. He could treat his guest however he wanted. And maybe with some people, that works. Maybe some people are so desperate for the exposure, so hungry for the platform, that they'll put up with anything. But not Chaka Khan. Never Chaka Khan. As she walked off that stage, she didn't just walk away from a bad interview. She walked away from a culture that thinks it's okay to treat artists like products to be consumed and discarded. She walked away from the idea that fame means surrendering your right to be treated with basic human decency. She walked away from a host who valued controversy over conversation, spectacle over substance, and in walking away, she sent a message, not just to Andy Cohen, but to every host, every interviewer, every platform that thinks they can treat people however they want just because they have a microphone and a camera. The message was simple but powerful. We don't have to accept this. We don't have to participate in our own humiliation. We can say no. We can walk away. Think about what it takes to make that decision in the moment, to stand up, remove your microphone, and leave, knowing that cameras are recording every second, knowing that people will have opinions, knowing that someone will try to spin it against you. It takes courage. It takes conviction. It takes an unshakable sense of self-worth. Chaka Khan had all of those things. And when push came to shove, when the choice was between preserving her dignity or playing along with someone else's game, she chose herself. Every single time, she chose herself. The confrontation, as uncomfortable as it was to watch, revealed something important about the entertainment industry and the way we treat our legends. We put them on pedestals, we celebrate their work, we call them icons and legends and pioneers. But then, when they're sitting right in front of us, we forget all of that. We see them as content, as material, as a means to get ratings or clicks or viral moments. Andy Cohen's questions weren't about learning from Chaka Khan. They weren't about exploring her creative process or understanding her journey. They were about creating moments, getting reactions, manufacturing drama. And when she wouldn't give him what he wanted, when she refused to play the game, he got frustrated. He got defensive. He tried to make her the problem. But she wasn't the problem. She never was. The problem was a system that prioritizes entertainment over respect, sensationalism over substance. The problem was a host who thought he could get away with behavior that would be unacceptable in any other professional setting. The problem was the assumption that just because someone is famous, just because they've chosen a public career, they've somehow forfeited their right to boundaries. Chaka Khan walking off that stage was a rejection of all of that. It was a statement that said, my worth is not determined by your platform. My legacy is not diminished by your disrespect, and I will not compromise my dignity for your entertainment. When she reached that exit and pushed through those doors, leaving the studio behind, she did so knowing exactly what it meant. She knew people would talk. She knew there would be takes and opinions and debates, but she also knew something more important. She knew she had done the right thing. She had stood up for herself in a moment when it would have been easier to just grit her teeth and get through it. That's what makes this moment so powerful. It wasn't planned. It wasn't scripted. It was a real human being reaching their breaking point and deciding that enough was enough. It was authenticity in an industry that often demands we hide our true feelings. It was strength in a moment that could have been played as weakness. And the audience responded. They clapped. They cheered. They supported her decision to walk away because on some level, everyone understands what it feels like to be in a situation where you're not being treated right. Everyone has had a moment where they wish they had the courage to just leave, to just say no, this isn't okay, and I'm not going to be a part of it. Chaka Khan gave people permission to do that. She showed that it's possible, that you can walk away, that you should walk away when the alternative is surrendering your self-respect. The interview that was supposed to be a celebration turned into something else entirely. It became a master class in boundaries, a demonstration of what it looks like when someone refuses to be bullied or diminished, a reminder that legends become legends not just because of their talent, but because of their character. Andy Cohen learned a hard lesson that day. Or, at least, he should have. He learned that you can't treat everyone like they're desperate for your approval. He learned that some people value their dignity more than they value airtime. He learned that when you disrespect a legend, don't be surprised when they remind you exactly who they are. And Chaka Khan? She didn't learn anything she didn't already know. She already knew her worth. She already knew what she would and wouldn't tolerate. She already knew that no interview, no show, no platform was worth compromising who she is. That's the difference between a true legend and someone who just wants to be famous. Legends know themselves, they know their value, and they protect it, even when it costs them something, especially when it costs them something. As Chaka walked out of that building and into the night, she carried with her the respect of everyone who had witnessed what just happened. She carried with her the knowledge that she had stood up not just for herself, but for every artist who has ever been mistreated in the name of entertainment. She carried with her her dignity, her self-respect, and her unshakable sense of who she is. And Andy, he was left sitting in that chair, trying to figure out what had just happened, trying to understand how an interview had gone so wrong. But the truth is, he probably still didn't get it. He probably still thought Chaka had overreacted, that she had been too sensitive, that she should have been able to take a joke. But it wasn't a joke. None of it was a joke. It was disrespect disguised as entertainment. It was condescension masquerading as conversation. It was an ego so inflated that it couldn't see past itself to recognize the harm it was causing. The walking off wasn't the story. The walking off was the consequence. The story was everything that led up to that moment. Every dismissive comment, every inappropriate question, every time Andy chose spectacle over respect. That was the story. Chaka leaving was just the inevitable conclusion. This moment will be remembered, not because of the drama, not because of the controversy, but because it was real, because it was a genuine human response to a genuinely bad situation, because it showed that even in an industry built on image and performance, there are still people who refuse to pretend, people who refuse to smile and nod while being disrespected, people who know that their worth isn't determined by someone else's opinion or platform. Chaka Khan is one of those people. Always has been, always will be. And on that night, in that studio, she proved it once again. She proved that you can be gracious and still have boundaries, that you can be professional and still stand up for yourself, that you can walk away and still hold your head high. That's the real lesson here. Not that drama makes for good television, not that conflict creates viral moments, but that dignity matters, that respect matters. That how we treat people, especially people who have given us so much through their art, matters more than ratings or clicks or entertainment value. Chaka Khan walked off Andy Cohen's show, but more importantly, she walked away with her integrity intact, her dignity preserved, and her legacy untarnished. She reminded us all what it means to be a legend, not just in talent, but in character, not just in achievement, but in how you carry yourself when someone tries to tear you down. She walked off that stage, but she walked into history, into the long line of artists who refused to be diminished, who stood up when it would have been easier to sit down, who said no when everyone expected them to say yes. That's what legends do. They don't just make great art, they live with integrity. They know their worth, and they never, ever let anyone make them forget it.